Dust shimmered in the late afternoon heat, a wavering veil between earth and sky. Matthew Cole rode at an easy pace, reins loose in his hand, the horse's shadow stretching long over the baked trail. His canteen bumped softly against his thigh with each stride, the leather strap worn smooth by years of habit. The day was almost done, and he was thinking of the tin-roofed shack that passed for home. Coffee gone bitter on the stove, a bed narrow enough to remind him he slept alone. The sound reached him first, a ragged cough, dry as brittle sage. He slowed, scanning the parched creek bed below the trail. There, kneeling beside a collapsed paint horse, was a man in buckskin, his hair silvered and bound with leather, beads glinting faintly in the light. The horse's flanks heaved shallowly, nostrils caked with dust. The man's lips were cracked, his breathing shallow but deliberate, as though he would not let weakness hurry him. Matthew swung down without thinking. His boots scuffed the hard ground as he unslung his canteen. The man looked up, eyes dark and steady, measuring him in a single glance. "You get what you cannot spare?" the man rasped, voice roughened by thirst. Matthew crouched, uncapped the canteen, and tilted it to the stranger's mouth. The water caught the sunlight for an instant, a fleeting ribbon of silver, before disappearing between dry lips. The man drank sparingly, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, then guided the spout toward the horse. Matthew steadied the animal's head while the water ran, darkening the dust beneath its muzzle. When the last drops were gone, the man inclined his head, a gesture more solemn than a handshake. No names, no explanations. He rose slowly, gathered the reins, and began leading the horse toward the horizon. Matthew watched them go until they became no more than two shapes swallowed by the heat haze. By the time he reached town, the light had turned amber, lengthening shadows across the main street. The saloon's batwing doors slapped in the evening breeze. Matthew stepped inside of the low hum of conversation, boots creaking on warped floorboards. Faces glanced up, then away. He took a seat at the end of the bar, ordered whiskey. The barkeep poured without small talk. From the corner, Jed Morrow's voice carried, sharp, deliberate. "Well, if it ain't Charity Boy, how's the family fortune? Still watering strangers instead of mending your own skin?" A few men laughed. Matthew didn't turn. He drank, letting the burn anchor him to the moment. Words wouldn't change what they saw. A man from a good name brought low by his father's debts. Too quiet to fight back, too stubborn to leave. When the glass was empty, he set it down and walked out into the cooling air. The first drops of rain struck his hat brim, darkening the dust at his feet. By the time he reached his shack, the sky was spilling steady water, drumming on tin and earth alike. Inside, the damp air carried the faint scent of pine from the stacked kindling. He set his hat aside, lit the lamp, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, the rain deepened, a soft roar on the roof. He thought of the man by the creek, the weight of his gaze, the measured way he'd accepted the water without a word of plea or thanks. There had been something unshaken in him, even at the edge of collapse. Matthew leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the rain. The sound filled the small room, steady and sure, as if the world were washing itself clean. Yet beneath it, he swore he could hear something else. The faint, rhythmic beat of hoofsteps on wet ground, drawing closer through the night. Morning broke with a pale mist curling low over the grass, blurring the line where land met sky. Matthew stood on the porch, coffee warming his hands, watching the wet world breathe in the early light. The rain had left the earth rich and dark, the air sharp with the scent of sage and damp wood. Somewhere in that hush, hoofbeats began to pulse, a slow, deliberate rhythm that did not belong to passing riders. Shapes emerged through the mist. At their head rode the man from the creek bed, upright in the saddle, as though no weakness had ever touched him. His silver hair caught the faint sun, and behind him rode two young women, each as distinct as the morning and the dusk. One sat tall and unbending, her braid bound with turquoise thread, eyes level and unyielding. The other rode with her shoulders looser, her gaze curious, the corners of her mouth almost daring to smile. Matthew stepped down from the porch, boots sinking slightly into the softened earth. The riders halted a few yards away. The man dismounted with unhurried grace, his gaze steady. "I am Rains Wise," he said, his voice carried without strain. "You gave water when you had little. Such a gift cannot be left without answer." Matthew shifted, unsure whether to nod or deny. "It was water," he said simply. The chief's eyes didn't waver. "It was life, and life must be honored." He gestured toward the women. "My daughters, Elara and Mara. I offer them both to you, in marriage, that you might guard them as you guarded me." Matthew's breath stalled. He looked from the chief's solemn face to Elara's measuring gaze, then to Mara's open, searching one. It was not jest. There was too much gravity in the air, too much silence between the words. Before he could speak, another sound intruded, the hard gallop of a single horse. Jed Morrow pulled up in a spray of mud, his mouth already curled in smirk. "Well, ain't this a picture?" Tribe chief offering up his bloodline to the town's favorite charity case. His gaze slid over Lara and Mara without courtesy, lingering just long enough to sour the air. Matthew's jaw tightened. "Not your business, Jed." Jed laughed, shaking rain from his hat. "Everything's my business when it parades past my land. Tell me, Chief, what's a man like him going to do with 2 wives? Can't keep a roof from leaking, let alone." The chief stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Your tongue dishonors you." Jed's eyes flicked between them, measuring the silence, then spat in the mud. "Enjoy your charity, Cole." He wheeled his horse and was gone, the sound of hooves fading into mist. The chief turned back to Matthew. "A man is judged by what he stands for, not by the noise around him. Come to our camp. See our way of life before you answer." Matthew hesitated. He felt the pull of something heavier than curiosity. It was the same pull he'd felt when he tilted the canteen to the chief's lips. Something about the offer carried a weight beyond himself, beyond the bound of the town that had never let him forget where he'd fallen from. He looked once more at the daughters. Elara's expression had not softened. She seemed to be waiting for him to prove something unseen. Mara's gaze, by contrast, held a quiet welcome, as she saw past the weathered jacket and the silences he kept. "I'll come," Matthew said finally. The chief nodded once, a decision sealed. "We leave at midday." They rode away in the same measured formation, mist curling around them until they vanished into it. Matthew stood in the yard, the coffee cooling in his hand, the damp earth holding the imprint of their horses' hooves. The air seemed changed, charged with the memory of what had just been spoken. From somewhere deep in the fog, faint and deliberate, came another sound, not the hoofbeats this time, but something slower. A branch creaked under shifting weight. The hair at the back of Matthew's neck rose. Someone else had been listening. Campfire smoke drifted in thin blue ribbons against a sky brushed with gold. The air smelled of roasting venison and pine resin, the ground soft with pine needles beneath Matthew's boots. He moved quietly among the tents, watching life unfold. Children chasing each other with shrill laughter, elders speaking in low, steady voices, women tending to the fire with practiced hands. Elara stood by the corral, a spirited roan dancing beneath her steady grip. Mara knelt by a blanket, mending a tear with even stitches, her braid falling forward over her shoulder. Matthew had never seen such stillness laced with purpose. No one hurried, yet everything moved. He felt his own edges soften, the restless pacing of his mind slowing to match the rhythm of the place. The chief's words from the morning still rang in him. Life must be honored. The moment broke with the sudden thunder of hooves. From a tree line rode Jed Morrow, flanked by 3 men with rifles slung across their backs. They dismounted without invitation, boots striking the earth like challenges. Jed's smirk was gone, replaced by something harder. "Cole," he called, voice carrying. "Didn't take you for the type to hide behind a tribe's skirts. You're coming back to town with us. Folks are saying you've been stolen." His eyes swept the camp with disdain. "Or maybe you just forgot where you belong." The chief stepped forward, calm but immovable. "This man is here as a guest." Jed's hand hovered near his revolver. "He's a fool if he thinks he can play house here. I'll take him home myself." Matthew felt the air tighten. Around him, the tribe had gone silent. Elara's gaze sharpened. Mara's hand froze mid-stitch. He stepped out from the shade, boots slow on the soft ground. "I'm not yours to take, Jed." "That's so." Jed's lip curled. You'll throw your lot in with them over your own? Matthew's voice was steady. They've given me more respect in a day than you've shown me in a lifetime. Jed's jaw tightened. The rifleman shifted. For a heartbeat, the air was thick enough to choke on. Then Alara's roan screamed, a high, tearing sound, as she loosed it into the clearing. The horse charged between Matthew and Jed, hooves striking the dirt in a shower of earth. Jed stumbled back, his revolver still holstered, pride dented by the sudden force of muscle and dust. The chief's voice cut through the tension. You came armed to shame a man in front of his hosts. Leave with what dignity you still carry. Jed looked at Matthew one last time, something between anger and disbelief in his eyes, then jerked his head at his men. They mounted and rode off, their shapes swallowed by the dark trees. The camp's breath seemed to return all at once. Alara caught the roan's reins, murmuring to settle it. Mara set her sewing aside and approached Matthew, her smile faint but certain. You didn't move when he reached for the gun, she said quietly. Wasn't about me, Matthew replied. It was about where I was standing. The chief joined them, his eyes holding that same steady weight as the day they'd met. You guard with more than hands, he said. You guard with the weight of your heart. Matthew felt the truth of it sink deep. He wasn't deciding whether to marry for the sake of an offer. He was choosing where his worth was seen, where it belonged. He met the chief's gaze. If the offer stands, I'll stay. Not because I gave water, but because you've given me something back. Alara's mouth curved just slightly. Mara's smile warmed. The chief inclined his head, sealing the choice without fanfare. The fire popped, sending a thin spiral of sparks into the dusk. From the edge of the camp, a branch creaked under weight. Matthew turned his head, catching a shadow between the trees, tall, still, watching. It wasn't Jed. Whoever was had been there longer, unseen, and hadn't come for conversation.